Welcome back, troglodytes, to the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today we have a collection of the most mysterious Gibson guitar that was ever created. This guitar is called the Gibson Moderne. These guitars are completely constructed out of a Korina wood. That means you have a multi-pieced Korina body with a Korina neck. And you have the traditional wings on the headstock. So you don't have a mahogany neck like you're used to, you don't have a maple neck like they were using in this era. That's kind of why these guitars are very unique. These guitars were birthed in the era of the Heritage series, and that series was basically created to pay tribute to the futuristic designs of the 50s that Gibson did. During the 1957 NAMM show, Gibson introduced the Flying V, Explorer, and the lesser-known Moderne and Futura guitars. Now, you've likely heard of a Flying V, and you've likely heard of an Explorer, but not everybody has heard about this freaky fish thing. This is the Moderne. Now, I'm not going to cover the Futura in this video, but it's basically just a mini Explorer with a funky headstock. It's kind of the lesser known of the four, but it does also exist. Now, where is the original Moderne at? Nobody really knows for sure. And the reason behind that is there's so many well-made replicas of these guitars, and there's not enough verifiable proof as to what an original one would look like, spec-wise, body route-wise. There's no real way to verify that any 50s Moderne is actually one of the originals. Now, there's rumored to be as many as a few dozen, but realistically, there's probably like 3 or 4 of them out there that were just prototypes for that NAMM show. So that's what kind of makes these guitars the Holy Grail of guitars. I mean, there's tons of bursts out there. That's the one that everybody looks for as far as, having a guitar that their heroes owned and used. But as far as a true Holy Grail that you're not ever supposed to find, that is the original Moderne. Now again, these 3 guitars are from the Heritage series when they rebirthed all those guitars, and they made them in 5 different finishes. But as far as production goes, there were essentially only 3. The 2 colors that really only existed in super limited quantities is the Candy Apple Red finish, as well as an elusive Cherry Sunburst that I've never even seen photos of. But those finishes were black, natural, and white. Now, nobody knows for 100% sure how many of these guitars were actually made. The number 500 of each seems to come up a lot, so that means there's 500 of these Modernes, 500 of the Heritage Vs. Now, that could mean there's more than that, there could mean there's a lot less than that, but you can definitely find a Heritage Series V or Moderne at most times for sale on eBay or Reverb. The Flying V has to be the most popular, but the Explorer is actually the harder one to find on the open market. The Heritage series is pretty much the first time somebody could actually get their hands on an authentic Gibson-made Moderne. So what are these guitars like to play? This is the first time I've actually ever handled a Moderne. I've wanted to review them, and I've got a lot of viewer comments saying to do them. So when Mike from the band Stranger Days came by today to share his collection with us, I thought this was just the perfect opportunity. We can knock almost all of them out with one video. So playing these guitars, they're kind of like half of a Flying V that's a little bit overshaped and it's a little off center. And then you've kind of got this weird can opener thing going on. You could also say this is a giant shark fin, or it's a shark mouth getting ready to bite down. It's just kind of an interesting design here. Now, sitting down and playing this thing, it kind of depends on the chair you're on, if it's comfortable or not. It's definitely usable. It's not completely ridiculous like the modern Flying V. You could straddle it kind of like you do with a V. So playing it this way, it's a little bit different than a Flying V because this little protrusion part here doesn't quite extend as far as on a V, but it is still comfortable to play it that way. But the true magic behind these beasts is standing with them on a strap. They're just so perfectly balanced. I because you've kind of got an X pattern going on here, and that really distributes the weight evenly on these guitars. Now, being made of Korina, they're very lightweight, so they're comfortable, and they just stay put. You don't really have that neck dive stuff going on with these due to their futuristic design. So while most people don't consider these players' guitars, they really are, because they're perfect. They don't break your back, they've got all the tone that you would want with your Tim Shaw PAFs, and you kind of have a medium kind of 50s neck profile on these. They're not overly fancy, you don't have fancy inlays, you don't have binding on the neck. If you're worried about tuning stability, don't worry, Gibson's got your back on that one because they gave it this freaky headstock design. If you thought Norland era Les Pauls had a wide headstock, take a look at this thing. That is a true boat paddle right here. So you have these 4 string trees right here that are very similar to that String Butler product that a lot of people have been talking about. Without these string trees, you would not be able to string this guitar up properly. It would never stay in tune. But thanks to these, it bends the string at a good angle and it goes straight on to the nut. So since that's a straight angle going on there, you're not having as much tuning stability issues. So these are excellent guitars as far as staying in tune while you're gigging them. Now the logos on these are just kind of plastic logos. It's common to see these get broken, and it's really unfortunate when that does happen. But I love this big gaudy Gibson headstock logo on these things. I kind of find them funny, and I think it just kind of completes the whole look of these guitars. I mean, they're super futuristic. They're almost a little bit too futuristic for most people. But the whole design of this guitar, while being wonky, it works. So I can understand why there are some people who really dig these guitars. So next, let's take a look at this truss rod cover. That's kind of a freaky shape there. It's not your traditional bell-style truss rod cover. It's kind of got a very large hat shape going on. It's got a flat bottom, and then it just kind of goes up. I don't know, kind of like one of those British hats that the Royal Guards have on. Something like that. And then the fretboard are rosewood. The pickups on these guys, your very famous Tim Shaw PAFs. They are fantastic pickups and they go for crazy money nowadays. Underneath the pickguard, there's no additional routing. You don't see like a channel cavity route. They did that through the body. So if you so desire, you could take that off and have a pickguardless version. The bridge on these is a Gibson ABR1, so that is definitely a historically accurate part. They didn't do the Nashville. That's kind of what made these guitars special, and why the whole Heritage series itself is special, is because it's kind of the start of Gibson going back to their traditional roots. That's something that the Heritage Modernes, Flying V's, and Explorers have over the Heritage 80 series of Les Pauls from the 2 years prior to these guitars. Those ones had the Nashville-style bridge, and that's the reason why I don't consider those guitars to be prehistorics. And then you have your standard stop bar tailpiece on this one. On these guitars, you have 2 independent volume controls and a master tone. And the whole reason why the Moderne has 3, as well as the Explorer having 3 and the Flying V having 3 controls, is because in the 50s they were trying to modernize the guitar. Most things that Gibson was offering at that time had 2 volumes, 2 tones. So by introducing this master tone, that kind of gives these guitars that futuristic high-end vibe. Now in the 50s, this futuristic lineup of guitars did not sell well. The world was not ready for these until the mid-70s and into the 80s. And Gibson realized that the world was finally ready and released this lineup. But was the world necessarily ready for these guitars? Maybe not. The Heritage V's sold like hotcakes. The Explorers did pretty well too. Those are still hard to find. And then the Modernes, there were some leftover parts in the factory. They originally set out to make 500 of these, but apparently the number is 143 or so. The only clues as to how many were actually made lie on the back of the headstocks of these guitars. The Heritage series of guitars were made in multiple series. They labeled them with a letter, and then they followed them with 3 numbers. They had the A series, the B, C, D, E, F, G, and H series guitars. Now that sounds like a lot of series, but I've never seen a number go over that 3-digit mark, so it's usually under 100 per series. Now I'm not saying there was 100 of each one made, there's no way to really know for sure, but that is something interesting to note on these guitars. Another interesting feature here is you have Gibson on the tuners right here. Now, not all of them have this. Usually the earlier ones do and the later ones might not. These are double-lined, double-ringed Kluson style tuners. The ones that didn't get the Gibson logo on them had a no-line double-ring Kluson style, similar to what's on the Antique Sunburst Spotlight Specials. Now normally, the Made in USA stamp being stamped horizontally like this would indicate that it is a Nashville-styled model, but apparently all of these were built in Kalamazoo simply because that factory was better set up for making such a limited run of guitars. So now that we've learned about some of these freaky guitars, its origin story, and why these are actually excellent playing guitars, now let's go ahead and hear how these guitars sound. we know how these guitars sound, let's go ahead and review the condition of these. First, we'll look at the natural Korina one. The face of the headstock, you've got your general light wear and tear, but nothing too extremely bad on this one. Your frets show very light wear to them, not a lot, but just enough to be able to say that yes, there is a little bit of playing time on this guitar. Original Tim Shaw PAFs, original ABR1, and bridge. Basically everything on this guitar is original except for the strat buttons. Now this one does have a few light nicks and dings on this guitar, but nothing that's really going to scare most collectors away. I think out of the three, as far as wood grain and beauty goes, I really like this natural finished one, and I can see why this one was the most popular choice. You've got a lot of nice dancing grain here. Now the knobs are original on this one, and everything is working the way it should. Back of the headstock, serial number E076, made in USA, and you have those Gibson stamped tuners. Now there is a very small ding right here by the headstock and a little bit of edge wear towards the top, but again, nothing too extreme. The neck is in good shape with just light wear and tear, and again, it's kind of a 50s neck profile, but not super big. I would say think of a 60s neck profile, but then add a little bit of chunk to it, but keep the roundedness, and that's what you're at. Most people would be comfortable with this neck profile. Back of the guitar, you've got a little bit of buckle worming. You can see once you get in the light right here, but nothing too extreme. You've got a small little ding right here, but that's probably the worst of it all. So that's what's kind of nice about this one. You don't necessarily have to be scared to play it because it has a little bit of wear. It's not a perfect collector's piece, but it's not going to turn most people off either. Take a quick look at the sides here as well. And again, a lot of beautiful wood grain to these. That's what I like about the side profile view of these. You got all this wood grain going on. Now I believe this is a 3-piece body, and you can kind of see the piece lines right here. But on the front, it blends in so incredibly well. Again, there are Dunlop Strat buttons on this. That's the only thing that is non-original to this guitar. The black one, it's kind of a similar condition going on here. You've got some light scratches on the face of the headstock, but nothing too extremely bad. Fret-wise, I would say there's very minimal wear, if any at all. This one doesn't look like it was played quite as much as the natural one. Now, as far as the top goes, I mean, this one's been really well taken care of. Most black guitars have a bunch of scratches on it, so this is definitely in good hands as far as keeping it in good condition. You've got some very minuscule scratches, and the only ding I see is right here by the output jack. There's just a very small ding where somebody must have missed the jack when they were going for that. You've got some light wear to the gold hardware, but overall, this is definitely a clean, presentable piece. Back of the headstock, this one is serial number H041, so it is definitely one of the final ones made. And this one has the no-line double ring Kluson style tuners. So that kind of confirms that this was probably one of the last ones, because they likely ran out of the Gibson branded version of this tuner. The back of the neck is in great shape. You just got a little bit of wear and handling from playing this guitar, as well as showing the condition. The back has some very minor buckle worming, but as far as black goes, this one's in great shape. There wasn't quite as many of these black ones made as compared to the natural ones. The sides are also in excellent shape with just average light wear and tear. So this is definitely a collector's grade example of this guitar. It even still has the original Strat buttons on it. This one is bone stock. And finally, the white one. Now this one is definitely the least favorable condition of the three. However, finding a white one is also difficult. Now you've got a bunch of finish checking on the face of the headstock here. It's the vertical kind of checking. It kind of gives it an interesting aged vibe to it. But thankfully your Gibson headstock logo is still intact, so nothing to worry about there. The frets are also in very good shape, just light play wear on this one. It plays evenly up and down the neck. Now this guitar pretty much has finish checking all over it in kind of random areas. It's just kind of how the white finishes are. They're really prone to this finish checking as they age. However, if you can live with that, it's definitely a very nice example of the harder to find white version of this guitar. Again, everything's stock on this example too, except for the strap buttons are Schalers. However, the originals are in the case. The only other small thing to note on this one is the grounding circuit has come undone on one of the pots simply because the original solder joint came off. However, it still functions just fine, and the owner of this guitar still even has that little solder joint ball. This one even has the original plastic still on the back plate. It's starting to peel in a few areas, but hey, at least you have it there. This one is of the F series, F025, and once again you have the Gibson tuners, as well as finish checking on the back. Now there are a few impressions on the back of the headstock. I'm not sure what those are about. It almost kind of looks like the prototype stamp that some of these have, but it's not. But the finish checking does continue on down the neck. Now this isn't the finish checking that would scare me that there's been a repair or anything, but it is definitely there and good to know about. This was also on a stand at one point in time and has a little bit of stand rash along the edges. Very minor, but it is there. Now you can tell this one was played because some of the clear coat has been worn off. That's kind of how you can see that this neck is a little bit more white on the back as compared to the rest of the guitar. That's because a very microscopic layer of the finish has been slightly worn off. We'll probably see that during the Blacklight demonstration. Now the back of this guitar has some additional stand rash of some sort. It's just a very mild burning of the finish. It's not really caught on fire or anything, it's just a chemical reaction. Other than that, you just kind of have these two little marks and some very slight buckle worming. I would say this is the cleanest example from buckle worming, but it's got some other stuff on it that keep it from being 100% perfect. We've got some more finish checking along the edges, but again, it's just a lightly played guitar. There is a very small chip in the finish right here where you can see through to the Korina body. So it's nice to know that there is still Korina under this solid finish. They didn't cheap out and use mahogany on you or something. There's also another chip right here, as well as another wear through area right by the strap pins. So again, this one has Schaller buttons on it, but other than that, the sides are in great shape. Now for the Blacklight test, we'll take a look at the natural one first. You can see the finish has this nice even glow to it. It's definitely what I would want to see, and the knobs are also glowing the way I would want to see as well. The face of the headstock also has that even glow. You can also see the tuner tips glow a little bit as well. There are no breaks, cracks, or repairs to this one. We're in good shape. The neck is also glowing, so you don't have any wear to the finish or anything. And everything looks good on the back of this one, as well as on the sides. Now the black one's probably the coolest one under Blacklight because, well, now it becomes green. Once again, you have the knobs glowing, the body of the guitar is also an even glow, and everything is looking good on this example as well. Back of the neck, no finish worn off of this one, and no breaks, cracks, or repairs, with a clean face. Now on to the white one. Definitely looks like the original finish again. You have the aged knobs. Back of the guitar, you can see that stand rash a little bit more, as well as those few light finish chip areas on this guitar. And as I was talking about earlier on this example, there's a very tiny clear coat layer worn off this guitar that kind of gives it that lighter appearance. Now under Blacklight you really don't see it, so again, it's kind of a non-issue, but no breaks, cracks, or repairs. Everything checks out on this. All three of these guitars do retain their original Gibson cases. They're kind of Lifton styled, similar to like the Les Paul 80s version one. They've kind of got a brown exterior to them with white trim. And this one has two locking latches, as well as a traditional latch, and they all have replaced handles simply because these Lifton styled reissue cases, they have a plastic handle that's really brittle. They just pretty much all break off at some point in time. The interior of these cases is kind of a pink magenta color, once again similar to the original Lifton style cases. This is the original one for the white version of this guitar, and they do have an accessory compartment in the case. I hope you enjoyed this review of the 3 main colors of the Gibson Moderne from the 80s Heritage series. If you think you might be interested in being the next owner of this trio of guitars, I will leave a link in the description to the Reverb listing that these guitars are listed on. Thank you for watching, Troglodytes. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.